everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. My name is Amel Chabbi. I'm the head of the conservation section here at the Department of Culture and Tourism, overseeing the conservation of Abu Dhabi's historic environment. I'm very happy to welcome you for this first workshop for the afternoon, which will focus on challenges and best practices with regards to project management. So building on 6 years, ALIPH-funded projects. This workshop will look at best practices and challenges when planning and implementing cultural protection projects in conflict and post-conflict areas. With over 150 projects in 30 countries spanning 4 continents, the management of projects is extremely critical to ensure that the ALIPH funds are effectively and efficiently spent and that projects achieve their intended short-term and long-term goals and have a lasting impact. Projects like the ones funded from ALIPH are complex, bringing together different stakeholders and project parties and offer a unique set of challenges in planning and implementation due to the very difficult and volatile context and affect the scope, the cost, and the resources, as well as the implementation team. We're going to be talking about many topics. Today, even though we're sitting almost like a panel, this is really an interactive workshop. We're going to start with 2 presentations by Shoshana and Shada. I will introduce all our speakers in just a second. But really, it's about, the questions should be coming from you rather than coming from me as the moderator. So I have questions prepared in case I need to give everybody a bit of courage to start asking questions. But yeah, I encourage the dialogue to come from the audience rather than it being a moderated panel session. So I'd like to introduce our panelists or workshop leaders, let's say. So Jeff Plunkett is the chair of the audit committee at ALIPH. He oversees ALIPH's adherence to accounting and financial standards and supervises all the audit work. And Jeff comes from the former global general counsel of Natixis Investment Managers. It's a leading investment management firm. Then we have Laurent Auster. He's Director of Finance and Operations at ALIPH. He's been there since February 2019, and he has over 20 years of experience in financial, legal, tax, HR, governance, and administrative management, and has been serving mid-sized organizations in the public, private, and non-profit sectors. Shoshana Stewart is an architect currently working as a director, is the president of Turquoise Mountain, and has spent the last 16 years leading the charity to restore and rebuild over 150 historic buildings, train over 10,000 traditional artisans and builders, and support the sale of over $12 million worth of artisan crafts. During her tenure, Shoshana has expanded the initial project in the old city of Kabul across Afghanistan and to 3 other countries. Next, we have Alexandra Fiebig, who works as a project manager at ALIPH. Before that, Alexandra worked for 9 years at the UNESCO World Heritage Center. And at ALIPH, Alexandra follows up on projects in Afghanistan, northeast Syria, as well as the action plan implemented by ALIPH during COVID-19 and after the Beirut blast, and more recently, the Ukraine action plan. And then finally, we have Shada Safi, who is an architect currently working as a director of Riwaq in Palestine, which she joined in 2008. She's been leading and working on different projects, including the rehabilitation project of Beit Iqsa, Hajja, Birzeit, and Qalandia. She is interested in cultural landscape and community involvement. So I will invite first Shada to present, to give a little presentation, a short presentation on the work that she's been doing at Riwaq. And then Shoshana will also present some of the projects that she's been doing, and then we'll engage in the discussion of project management.
Thank you, Amal. I don't think this is working, is it?
Well, I can hear you because you're next to me.
Okay. Do you mind?
I can just move over. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to see the faces that I know and don't know, and looking forward to learn more about the work and exchange knowledge. And thank you for ALIPH and for the for the organization of this event. So my name is Shada Safi. I'm the director. I'm an architect, but also the director of RIWAQ. And RIWAQ is an organization that was founded in 1991 with the aim of protecting cultural heritage in rural Palestine. I wanted to go through a very quick journey of what RIWAQ does to put you more in a context before we do some sort of summary of some practices or exchanging practices. So the aim is safeguarding and rehabilitation of you can't see, right? I can just go. So it's the rehabilitation of cultural heritage in rural Palestine. And when we talk about cultural heritage, we're talking about neglected spaces. This is, for example, the village of Rantis near Ramallah. You can see that it's abandoned, partially or totally demolished. There's no right or correct or strong legal framework to protect those heritage. There's also the lack of awareness, the lack of resources. And yet, this cultural heritage is really rich. It represents not only the architectural and the stone, but the story behind it, the relationship of people, the crafts, their daily life. So our mission is for the protection of cultural heritage in rural Palestine, and the idea is to bring life back, because we believe the ultimate goal of protection is bringing people back to their heritage, being the keepers of their own heritage. If there's a person in the cultural center or the historic center or the historic building breathing, taking care of it on a daily basis, the building is protected. If it's part of its daily life, socioeconomic development, it's protected. So we have a number of projects or programs. The first one is the job creation. We tend to create jobs through conservation, because conservation is a labor-intensive process. It creates lots and lots of jobs throughout the process of conservation. And we also tend to work on the preserving of the know-how, because for a long period we were losing the know-how behind the traditional crafts, traditional building techniques. There's also the regeneration of the most 50 significant historic centers to be rehabilitated as a whole historic center, to be used by the community, including housing, traditional markets, cultural centers, infrastructure, playgrounds for children. There's also the issue of community engagement and having the community as safeguardians, but also as real partners within the process. And the idea is that to transfer the ownership from us as initiators to the community. There's also the capacity building. We've been talking a lot about capacity building and having the know-how within architects, artisans, craftsmen, and engineers. So we host lots and organize lots of capacity building trainings and workshops for students within Palestine, but also from abroad. And we also dig and have some sort of research with local crafts. So this is a project that we've done on the traditional tiles, the colored traditional tiles, and the molds, how they were used to be done, how to keep maintaining, producing them locally. And it has also its an environmental approach, because we focus on locally produced material. We also are concerned in knowledge production and transfer. So we have a series of books that talks about cultural heritage and documents cultural heritage in Palestine. And it's really critical in the sense that it's written by Palestinians. So it doesn't have this sort of colonial or Orientalist approach. It's written by Palestinian architects, archaeologists, researchers, historians about Palestinian heritage or cultural heritage in Palestine as its layers. So with ALIPH, we have done two amazing projects. One of them is the Bitillo project. I think I have my own water. That's the bad thing about having lunch before the presentation. So Bitillo is a village near Ramallah, but it's located in Area C partially. So with the divisions, it also has the issue of where is it controlled by, who is it controlled by. It's not totally controlled by Palestinians. It has the issue of settlements around it. So it faces the loss and of cultural heritage. And this is the mansion where we tackled the preservation or the conservation project. A very nice architecturally mansion, yet it's getting demolished. It's getting structural instability. This is the mansion from inside. You can see some of the rooms are totally demolished. It has no ceiling. The circulation within the mansion is also problematic. And it's losing its architectural and aesthetic and also its relation with the young generations. So we've been through the process of documentation because we believe documentation is the main or the key element in the process. Once you document, you understand better, you go through the process and you understand not only the aesthetic and the architectural value, but also what's the story behind it. Lots of mapping. You can see also here how the soil erosion is affecting the mansion. Here also some structural instability. And also we've done some research on the circulation because the damages on the walls and some of the vaults affected the accessibility to some rooms. Then we've done some planning and the process of designing for adaptive reuse. It was done in collaboration with the Women Association, who would be the operating partner at a later stage, so dividing their places, their kitchen, and this is the place after renovation.
Hello.
This is not the updated one. I have some slides for Maya from ALIPH visiting this place. It was also this sort of relationship between ALIPH and us and being there physically really embraces the process. The second interesting example is the project in Gaza. We've been keen to work on Gaza on a yearly basis, at least initiate one project in Gaza because it's a very difficult area. We as Palestinians from the West Bank can't reach there, so for years and years we have been working through the capacity building of having another partner working there, working through Skype. At that time there was no Zoom, it was Skype. And each year we have a project. So this is the monastery of Saint al-Khadr in Deir al-Balah, and it hosts hundreds and hundreds of children on a daily basis, because it's the only space that is available, safe, available for kids. In 2020, we launched the campaign because after the last blasts in 2021, after the blasts on Gaza, Basma organization lost 2 of her premises in the towers that were bombed. So together we launched a campaign where ordinary organizations, and people who believed in the work of providing safe spaces for Basma, but also for cultural institutions in Gaza, joined. And ALIPH joined as well. UNESCO joined. We have the Jerusalem Trust from USA who joined, and hundreds of people who shipped from $100 to $100. And we were able to do the restoration for Basma Association. And finally, Basma has moved their premises from the rental spaces to the preserved space in Al-Luhaidi in Gaza. The last thing that the last example that I would like to go through is what we call the life jacket. It's the story of the rural Jerusalem. Rural Jerusalem, we have many fragmented villages that lost their relationship with their home city, Jerusalem. They're related to Jerusalem, but physically they can't access Jerusalem. So we have Beit Hanina, Beit Iksa, Qalandia, El Jib, Jabba. So, and they have many physical obstacles, and from the apartheid wall to the checkpoints, that they can't really reach Jerusalem. So we decided to reconnect those historic centers throughout their communities and throughout their historic centers. So we have Jabba, Qalandia, for example. Nobody knows that Qalandia exists as a village. Everybody knows Qalandia al-Hajj is the checkpoint, Qalandia the airport, Qalandia the refugee camp, but nobody knows that Qalandia as a village exists. So we started with the oral history because these villages were disconnected, fragmented, to try to reconnect them throughout their histories, and discover that, for example, in El Jib, they would have provided clay or pottery from around 2,000 years ago and imported. Lots of oral history sessions to understand and do mapping, and lots of community mobilization to plan before doing the physical intervention. And also we have local communities, not only as individuals, but also as governmental bodies with us. So we have the municipalities, we have the local scout, the local women association, all on board in the planning process of the rehabilitation. This is, for example, Kufr Aqab. This is before renovation. And you can see, like, people would say it's better to demolish it because it's a hazard. It's very dangerous for us to go through. And this is after its preventive conservation and the early phases of renovation. And the issue is also about bringing life back. So we have lots of the idea of transforming Kufr Aqab from an abandoned historic center to an environmental and cultural hub. And it won the Halsem Award for its environmental approach in 2020 on the Middle East and Asia region. And we have lots of communities who moved, of cultural institutions who moved partially off their premises or part of their programs in the historic center. So we have the Visual Arts Forum, we have the Palestine Writing Workshop, we have Dali Association, we have the local scout, we have the visually impaired persons having a library there. So this is before renovation, and this is after renovation. And even the community garden, where you used to have this common a place where they put their tomatoes and onions, were revived back because it's part of the history. This is also before renovation. And this is after renovation. This is the Dali Association. This is us with the municipality planting a tree and putting, part of their socio-economic development plans. The Historic Center is part of their plans, their development plans. And now we're having more people in the Historic Center, we're having more events, and the concept is to have the Historic Center for the future, for the present and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shada, for highlighting all these examples of wonderful projects. Now, Shoshana, would you like to go through your slides?
Hello, Tir. What I will have trouble following that. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is such a great conference. As I said to Valerie downstairs, this is like my favorite people in the world, people I've known for a long time from Afghanistan and elsewhere, and newer friends. So thank you for having me. I suppose, the North Star of ALIPH, preserving and promoting cultural heritage in conflict, is what Turquoise Mountain does. So we share completely the values of this organization, and it's just fun to be in a conference with everybody doing that. So what I thought I'd do is tell you a little bit about what Turquoise Mountain does to share and to form the context for a conversation about project management. Mostly focus on Afghanistan, which is where we've been working for 16, 17 years, and which is the most holistic set of work, and therefore the most complex in all of auditing and all of those sorts of things. But ALIPH has been an amazing partner there. So, Turquoise Mountain. This is Saida. She is a jeweler in Afghanistan. She went through our Institute for Afghan Arts and Architecture as a jeweler. She made this piece for the Smithsonian Museum in Washington and has run a business in Kabul for the last 7, 8 years, continues to run a business in Kabul. So let me transport you to the center of the old city of Kabul, one neighborhood of it called Murad Khani, and it's right on the banks of the Kabul River, right across the street from the presidential palace. A place of these incredible courtyard buildings, mud brick, timber frame courtyard buildings. But when we began in 2006, all the white stuff is snow. Those are collapsed buildings. So about half the building stock had already collapsed, and we were losing many buildings per winter. So we started restoring the buildings. This is before and after. I'm a little jealous of your fade technique. I have to, but seeing these things transformed is one of the joys of working in built heritage, I think. So we restored 150 of these buildings, everything in that neighborhood, and trained about 4,000 traditional builders. That's masons, carpenters, electricians, architects. There they are. And then in the intangible world, and Dr. Westerman has been quoted a couple of times today, I too don't find the distinction between tangible and intangible particularly relevant. I know that it exists, of course, but what we're talking about here is particularly carpenters, right? We're training on architectural woodwork, very fine floral carving, and then we're making products to sell that are objects. And that is a building tradition and a craft tradition and all those things. So practically it feels to me like that's absolutely combined. But we do have an institute for Afghan arts and architecture, and this is the reason we exist, is the idea that after, at that point, about 30 years of war in Afghanistan, the masters just didn't hand down what they knew. They had stopped producing, they had no students, khalas. And so we wanted to get the younger generation trained again. And so I will move on now to our collaborations with ALIPH. So one of the projects we have is the Murad Khani Revival Project, which is about restoring a number of buildings in this neighborhood. One of them, very serendipitously, this was one of those empty snow plots. So we've been infilling to re-establish the historic footprint and to make sure that there are usable spaces for the community. Okay, then the Taliban takes over Afghanistan, and one of the things, and I know my friends in the Aga Khan Trust for Culture and DAFA, are dealing with similar things. One of them is that for female students and male students, they need to be in separate spaces. Okay, so now we need to reorganize and make classroom space for female teachers, female students, and all the women's owned businesses. So one of the buildings we've done together is now the Women's Center, and that is where you have calligraphy, miniature painting classes. This is a student, but this is a entirely handwritten and hand-illuminated Quran on silk that we did a couple of years ago. Jewelry businesses. This is a line for the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. That is Saida actually making her collection for Ishkar, which is a London and Paris-based e-commerce site. So this is all happening in this building that we work together on with ALIPH, so thank you, ALIPH. Also, a set of buildings that were destroyed by a fire, and these are community houses, and so we need to work with families to just get them restored as quickly as possible so people can move back in. This is a wonderful this is one side of the courtyard. And again, this is a process of training also. And then I'll end on this, which is a project that is about to start. And actually, my colleague Felicity here is our deputy country director and lives in Afghanistan. This is her baby. She's also our built heritage specialist. This is a caravanserai in Bamiyan, in the central highlands of Afghanistan, which, for those of you who don't work in Afghanistan, it's the place that became sadly famous through the destruction of the Buddhas by the Taliban the last time. This is the most extraordinary piece of built heritage, very special. But the exciting thing is that this should be a project that is everything that I care about, and I saw it very much in Shadda's presentation, about bringing these sites back to life. If they are restored and they sit empty, it doesn't work. It's gotta matter to the community because they'll take care of it, but also because people need livelihoods. They need it to matter. So we run 2 weaving centers across the street from this thing, and we created about 18,000 full years of employment in carpet weaving over the last 4 years or so. That's mostly through selling a lot of carpets and working with thousands of weavers. That is one carpet, obviously. There it is. So pretty. So you have this incredible built heritage, and this is, an old drawing of what one of dozens of these vaulted spaces. But then it is about making this into a carpet washing and finishing center. So it becomes the center of exporting carpets from Bamiyan. And we also run 2 primary schools in Bamiyan. And so if we succeed at this, this is everything that I want out of a project, in which I appreciate ALIPH as a partner in, which is that it can be, first of all, the conservation of a really special piece of built heritage and intangible heritage, but also will provide livelihoods. It's about employment, it's a community washing facility, there's primary schools, literacy courses, and finally, you have a site in the middle of Bamiyan, which is an ethnic minority area of Afghanistan, which would be thriving through cultural heritage at its center and women as the only breadwinners in their families. So I think this is a really special project, and we can absolutely do it. I mean, we're doing it. So the possibilities really in Afghanistan are significant right now. Very briefly, I live in Jordan, so we work with Syrian artisans in Jordan, with Palestinian artisans in Jordan, with Jordanian artisans in Jordan, hopefully now setting up in Bethlehem and working with Palestinians in Palestine. This is Abu Abdu. He is from Damascus, and this is a traditional Syrian wedding chest in Leighton House, House Museum in London. And he's made this along with 7 other pieces of furniture inspired by that for their refurbishment. This is his apprentice, Mohammed Ibrahim. You very much have the master and the traditional in Mohammed Ibrahim breaking all the rules of Islamic geometry to create that bit of more contemporary mosaics. Wonderful glasswork from El Khalil, from Hebron, which we've brought to try to sell in Amman. So the thing I wanted to end with was beginning to answer some of the questions posed by this workshop. One, what are the difficulties that operators face when working with cultural heritage in conflict? The most fundamental one that I see is that conflict, to my 400 staff, 390 of whom live in the countries in which we work, is that you can't depend on anything. You can't depend on education, healthcare, roads, checkpoints. Everything is up in the air. And so it's that silos don't work. If you want to work with a community, you got to meet everyone on what they need, right? Saida is not going to be able to run a jewelry business if her kids are not in school. It doesn't work. So you have to deal with all those things. So, my answer to that is really about working with a community on so many different levels, forgetting about sectors. I'm a cultural heritage organization. But if you talk to 10 different donors, they'll say I'm different. I'm an economic development organization for one, I'm an infrastructure organization for another. But at the center of this, and this is the final point, is cultural heritage. And I think, we're a bunch of cultural heritage junkies and practitioners, so we believe in it, but a lot of the rest of the world thinks it's peripheral or not that important or whatever. To me, in the rest of international development, which is basically starts from the point of everything being bad, starts from deficiencies, right? You are poor, uneducated, you don't know how to treat your women correctly, you're not taking care of that. It's like the fundamental premise of a lot of the international development community. It's pretty offensive and pretty terrible as a conversation. Cultural heritage is the opposite. It says, this is an asset. It's a tradition, a building, a heritage, our inherited traditions. And that matters, and it's precious, and that you can create livelihoods from it and all that. So I do think that we can't forget that cultural heritage is a very special way, I think, to move through the world and to work with people across countries and within our own communities. So that is just the context of Turquoise Mountain, and we can, of course, get into like how you move money in sanctions regimes and what other kind of fun things reporting that everyone wants to talk to. And thank you again for having me.
No, that's for later. Right. Okay, thank you, Shoshana, for your presentation. Keep these presentations in mind and start the dialogue. And I just want to get one more intervention here from Alexandra and perhaps Laurent as well, about explaining what is ALIPH's role in project management of projects that are applied to ALIPH or funded by ALIPH.
Sure, Joe. Maybe, yeah, just to remind the people, and maybe for those who are not familiar with ALIPH, the fact that we are we are a grant-making foundation, so we don't implement projects ourselves. I mean, we identify operators in the field that do it for us. So our job is to identify projects, to select operators, to do our due diligence, make sure ahead of the project that everything is under control, but we don't implement projects. So we're not pros in project management. You are the pros in, you know the context, you know the scientific and technical parts. We're here to support you. So it was just a few words.
And perhaps to add on the on what Laurent explained as ALIPH as an institution, as a team, we also try to translate that as a team the way we work with all our partners. One, we learn through our partners. You know, the more projects ALIPH funds, the more knowledge we also acquire how you manage projects in these conflict and post-conflict areas. And we're very open, and the word I'm looking for is
flexible.
Flexible? No, we've had this exchange. This is more closer. Collaborative. That was the word. Anyways, we want to have the open communication channel because you've seen the wonderful projects they're doing there. We want to export your models and make them as viable as possible. And we're always just an email or phone call away.
I mean, I think that, you know, we're bringing together the ALIPH family here to meet everyone, to connect, but also there's learning from each other's challenges and practices, and you know, everybody has something to contribute to the wider picture. And I think that having projects that have been funded by ALIPH benefit from this contributing to this bank of information that you as the funder can also help disseminate across new projects that come around. So I think that's something very important.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of challenges, I mean, Shoshana and Shada mentioned a few from the ground. And perhaps you could expand a little bit more on this, especially, Shoshana, with the change in government, that was probably one big curveball in your long-term goals or projects. Shada, the daily kind of challenges are really impacting. And from ALIPH's perspective, in terms of what do you see as some of the other challenges that have cropped up across different projects? And please, anybody, raise your hand. There's mics. You can ask any questions as well. So let's start with some challenges, and then maybe you're welcome to share challenges from your projects, so that we can have an exchange.
I think the challenges go beyond the physical act of having a struggle or conflict. It goes deeper. And like what we're facing here is a change in the demography, in the landscape, in the fragmentation, in the socioeconomic issue of Palestinians. So having people who are displaced and being abroad, what's the relationship with their heritage, having heritage as a privately owned. This sort of negotiation of people who have left the place since 70 years do not have this sort of relationship. So it goes beyond to and transforms into more technical issues. So we're struggling also with the sense of fragmented ownership. We're struggling with the issue of lack of awareness. We're struggling also with the fragmentation and lack of access to the spaces. We're struggling of our legal system that is not able to protect the cultural heritage with the old laws that we have, or even the new laws that are not being put in practice, they're not well supported. And we're struggling also with the community changing into modernity, into more of capitalism, and like the rest of the world, but it's also happening in different pace and in different in the areas that we're facing another also circumstances. So these are all layers of challenges that has the same roots, but is diverting into different impacts.
I'm going to go really gritty. So communications. Right? Like our work in Afghanistan right now, I basically took down our website for a year and a half because I don't know what's safe. Everyone thinks everything in Afghanistan is closed, but it's not. However, we run 3 primary schools and there are female teachers working for our NGO because we have special permission from the Bamiyan municipality and from the Ministry of Education for those women to come in. That's totally fine. The Taliban know everything that we're doing. The second I go on 60 Minutes and start talking about it, or I put it up on, a picture on Instagram of Dr. Khojista, our OBGYN, serving her patient, halas, we have to leave. So that's difficult, right? Because if you're trying to fundraise, and if you're trying to advocate for working in the place that you're working in, that's really hard. Thank you, ALIPH, for allowing us not to tell anybody about the wonderful work that you're enabling. They have been very, very flexible. I think, I think we're hoping to be able to talk more about that publicly because some of the stuff is just clearly not controversial in the slightest, and I think buildings are part of that. Second thing, timing and planning. As you say, like the Taliban took over, and that was a little bit of a wrench in the works. It's incredibly important for donors working in these kinds of situations that they understand that timing changes, right? So we asked, it's a single email. Can we have a no-cost extension? They gave us a no-cost extension. There's a lot about managing that process, but basically they've been, it has to be like that in conflict, but thank you to them for being like that. We could talk forever about money, right? Not just getting enough funding, but we implement funding in Afghanistan and in Myanmar and Burma. Those are 2 places under significant sanctions. So how you move money, and I implement US government money I have a Scottish auditing firm. You know, everyone's watching that very, very carefully. So you have to move money in a responsible and transparent way, and that's not easy. So those are some of the sort of more operational.
Yeah, I mean, this is what this workshop's about, is about getting down to detail, so.
And as a founder, obviously, I mean, we face a lot of challenges. One of the largest, definitely, these days is channeling in the funds to some countries, such as Afghanistan or Yemen or even Iraq. So it's a day-to-day challenge, and it's getting more and more difficult, as I think you know. One other challenge that we face is, for example, in certain areas, such as Mosul, the fact that we have so many projects, just ALIPH, but not just ALIPH, so many international organizations having international projects in Mosul. I mean, it means millions of dollars pouring in. It's in such a small place, with the risk of disrupting local businesses and markets. So our role in this context is to try to coordinate, to define common rules, how we pay people, for example. So it's a challenge that we have. In other areas, such as Yemen, the challenge is to be able to identify operators. We just don't find the people, because some of them are willing to do the project management part, but they don't want to deal with the money. It's too big a risk for them. So that type of challenges.
I think the changing environment that Shoshana already, I mean, I think Afghanistan is quite a strong and clear example, but I think in many of the countries where we work with, ALIPH does, apart from working directly with the grantees, we also do a lot of coordination with the authorities, backstopping and so on. So, and there's a cycle of projects that we have the authorities on board responsible for heritage. Couple of years later, you have to start again, and you know, you have to align, trying to align what the organizations from the ground would like to come up with project ideas, and also balancing with what we hear from often changing, quickly changing authorities.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I remember that Valerie said that there were some discussions, for example, when there was the change of government, ALIPH did come in and try to smooth things out, be part of the dialogue on valorizing cultural heritage, facilitating the work and projects in general, not just for ALIPH projects, but just be part of the dialogue. So that's one aspect of where ALIPH comes in and supports the implementation of projects.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And perhaps just another note on what Laurent said about flows of funds, but we also have to deal with very, very volatile exchange rates that fluctuate. Yeah. We operate in several currencies that are linked to USD. That is very complicated. I think our finance and administration team has been finding solutions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
when it's possible.
We need to be creative, yeah.
When it's possible, but also thanks to the work with the suggestions from organizations that have experience with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do we have a floating mic for questions from the audience?
It's coming. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Second row, in the front here.
Will you raise your hand, sir?
Vous pouvez lever la main, monsieur? Merci.
Good afternoon. How do you face? Comment faites-vous pour les projets ou les contextes dans lesquels la monnaie fluctue, alors que les budgets ont été établis dans la demande des projets et pour lesquels souvent soit les matériaux deviennent plus chers, soit les salaires deviennent plus faibles par rapport à ce qui a été fixé. On a entendu flexibilité ce matin, mais comment est-ce qu'on réagit à ça dans les projets?
That's something we try to take obviously in consideration at the time of the budgeting, obviously. I mean, so we want to know, I mean, to have the big breakdown of costs by currencies so that we have an idea of the risk that we're taking. There's obviously no way to hedge this risk because there is no hedging solutions for local currencies. But and we are facing right now the price increases for raw materials. So that's something we have in mind, and we're always open to discuss. I mean, to discuss budget increases when it's grounded, and so it's something that we have in mind because we know we're going to face these problems a lot the coming months and years. So, but we prefer to. I mean, we pay in hard currencies, in euros or in dollars, so that we don't face the problem of local currencies losing value. And we tend to, I mean, especially when we work with small NGOs, I mean, we prefer to make many small installments just to, because some of them just they just can't receive dollars, so they just can receive local currencies. So we prefer to make many small payments so that the funds don't lose their value.
Sorry, can we just wait a second? Does anybody else need a translation device before we move on? Okay.
Thank you.
Perhaps just to add that there is a 10% flexibility that is inbuilt within the budget from the start, and anything beyond that is a discussion that...
I think we have mentioned, and you have mentioned earlier, that every place and every circumstance has its own thing, and you're being flexible and responsive enough to act differently in Ukraine than Yemen, than Iraq, and this helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry. On reviendra.
Hi. Two challenges that I see arising. One is not violating or not challenging local hierarchies. Mm-hmm. So, for example, what happens when a grant gives a much higher salary to someone than the civil servants that are monitoring this, for example? So this is a very big challenge, and it's not always easy to get the right information as a donor. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to get the right information from the implementing partners, but even then, it's not always possible to get the right information. So that I find a very big challenge in general, because very often state employees might want to actually work for a project, and they end up not doing their job, and they end up working with a project, so we're actually damaging the country rather than helping the country. So I find this a very big issue that actually has many, many consequences all over the place.
Yeah.
The second challenge that I saw we had two amazing projects represented here. And from our community engagement work, we see that actually locals are much easier to play ball when they are engaged with heritage that they appreciate. They're much less likely to play ball with heritage they don't appreciate. And so in ALIPH's agenda, we see a lot of heritage that is dead to the locals. So it is in these particular circumstances, which are a lot, where we need a much, much greater effort at community engagement, a much, much greater effort at community engagement before even work starts. Just to give you an example, I'm an archaeologist, so in archaeology we start an excavation when we have a particular question. Great. But actually community engagement will change the questions in the field and will give you information from recent history, from current uses of buildings, etc., that will completely change the way you're thinking before you excavate. So what you're going to find is very different than if you do not do the community engagement. So, I mean, they're kind of statements, but they are also cues for you to react. Thank you.
I think the community engagement point was one that we had discussed in our preparation for the workshop, is involving the community from not just as stakeholder engagement and dialogue and see what they want, but really engage the community from A to Z in the whole project life cycle, from ideating the project, understanding the needs, resolving, scoping it, into implementation. And afterwards, post-implementation. I think your projects show that in ways, and as far as when projects come through ALIPH, how do you is that something that you look at to make sure that it's integrated as part of the project proposal somehow? So, who would like to start first? Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I think this sort of dead heritage site issue, as a blunt description of that, is important. I would just flip it around a little bit, which is to say that I think we can be very procedural about it. Like, okay, what do? You consult the community. What does that mean? Like, we all get in a room and we have a conversation and we say, what do you want? Okay, fix my house. I'd like a salary. Like, we all want lots of it. I mean, that's not how it looks, right? And then, I don't know, I picture whiteboards. My experience of that is simply that, of course, you do need to do that. Everyone needs to have a conversation about what you're going to use it for and what the priorities are, yes. But fundamentally, this is an overgeneralization. People need jobs. It needs to be a living economic success. And that, it's why museums with closed doors are often some of the most problematic, cultural projects, I think, or sort of, restored buildings that are supposed to be like exhibition space. If there's no money to run it, nobody's going to go in. I'm not sure that's because it was not an important building. It's hard. So I think that, if we're looking at tourism sites, that's about being really serious about how you're going to get tourists in and what they're going to buy. If it's about intangible heritage, our answer to that is we got to sell it. I did not start this thinking that we were going to be selling crafts. That was not what I thought we were going to do. We had to learn how to do it. And I think then in terms of maintenance structures, but again, you can't solve that by making a neat little, cooperative management board. The structure is not the point. It has to be much, much more real about how people are going to use it and where the money is going to come from afterwards, is my primary experience with that.
I also find it very interesting the way you mentioned about the interest of people, if they're feeling the heritage represents them or not, and it's also changing. Now we're, for example, witnessing emerging religious/political parties that are demolishing shrines, المقامات, because it's to their new perspective of religion. It's not the basic religious, it's bid'ah. We call it bid'ah. We're witnessing people who we thought this heritage would represent them, doesn't represent them anymore. They're not related to it. And you have also to get to different dialogues within yourself, but also with them to understand what's the logic. Where did it come from? So it came to my mind, this example, that we're witnessing changes also on what the community thinks is the representation of them, of their identity, and what is not.
And maybe regarding your questions about how we compensate civil servants, I mean, that's definitely a question we've faced many times in various countries. And but it doesn't matter what ALIPH decides in that matter. If other organizations do, other international organizations do other way, I mean. So, and I would say it's ALIPH's strength to talk to everybody, to have open communication channels with these institutions, and to be able to have a dialogue and try to find common grounds on what we should do and not do in this context.
I find in general that we don't pay the exorbitant salaries of a lot of international NGOs, but it is just the case in most places we work that it's more than a government salary, and it just is, and we can't run a project without it, so somewhere in between.
Anybody have anything else to add?
Just perhaps to build on that question, I think 99%, 95% of our projects have a very, very strong local anchorage that we look at, the local partners, the salaries that are being paid to the surrounding villages, for example, that the heritage is located in. And I don't, maybe because I've worked a lot in Afghanistan, but one of my favorite examples is a project implemented by ASHCO, by an Afghan local organization. They have worked for 3 years on a big Buddhist shrine, a stupa. Yes, thank you. And for 3 years, in the 5 villages around it, there's more than 120 households who have in the area lived from this. And I mean, it is a way to create, let's say, support throughout and just preserve a very, very unique site. And I say 95% because then we also have perhaps the Arch of Ctesiphon that was already mentioned today several times. That is a kind of freestanding monument, not many surrounding communities, but we also feel that there's and because of its uniqueness, it is worthwhile also to preserve it for a kind of greater good.
Sorry, the gentleman in the front here, in orange.
Rashad?
Yeah.
Oh no,
Yeah.
Bonsoir. Moi, j'aimerais savoir, ma question, c'est savoir à l'endroit des zones du Sahel, c'est-à-dire quels critères vous vous basez pour financer les projets dans ces contextes, sachant que les besoins sont énormes, c'est-à-dire les limites de financement, parce qu'on a des besoins qui vont au-delà du financement toujours, mais quels sont les critères selon lesquels vous vous basez pour financer les différents projets? Merci.
Well, as you may know, we have 2 types of intakes, or even 3 types, but we have these calls for projects once a year. We have the emergency projects, so it's all year long, and we have these action plans, ad hoc plans that we launch because of a specific crisis arising, such as Beirut 2 years ago and Ukraine. So obviously our finances are not unlimited, but from a financial point of view, I mean, it shall make sense. But we have projects, I mean, ranging from $10,000 to up to 5, even 10 million with our flagship projects with the Mosul Museum. So we have a wide range of projects. I mean, from a purely financial point of view, I mean, there is space. I mean, we can do a lot of things. Then we have obviously other types of criteria, but I'll leave it to you.
And I think the selection criteria by itself, they remain the same for all the projects we look at. This secretariat does a pre-selection. Perhaps I can quickly talk about this as well. So we receive the projects. There's a pre-selection that is being done at the secretariat level, always according to the same criteria: relevance, scientific rigor, value for money, and feasibility, which means operational capacity to do so. Then, on the basis of these criteria, this scientific committee receives the projects with a short assessment of our side. Amel is part of our scientific committee, and she's a very active and very active, very demanding member of a scientific committee. So this is the next step that it goes through. And once the scientific committee makes a recommendation to the foundation board is the last instance. So there's several levels that it goes through, and it is a difficult and demanding process, but that's why we end up with wonderful projects.
I have a question.
Like many of you. Go ahead.
I have a question about the coordination or relation with the other emergency or cultural heritage funders. Like we have the Cultural Protection Fund, we have the Prince Claus, the Cultural Emergency Response, the World Monument Fund, and ALIPH as well. And you're also targeting relatively same regions or areas where there are struggle or conflict. So are there any sort of dialogue, coordination?
Would you like to speak?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we're in very regular contact with all these wonderful organizations. We have monthly, at the moment there are monthly meetings where we get together for thanks to Zoom and COVID. It was actually properly installed during COVID times. It's a network of grant makers, and we do thematic discussions, or when there is the certain events that happen, we can also meet more frequently on Ukraine or Syria and Turkey. So it is a very active network, and we talk to each other. We also call each other up and say, "What do you think about this organization?"
I thought I might just, to your question, sir, about what it's like from the grantee's perspective. I think we find ALIPH to be a relatively manageable partner. No, I mean that. You know, it's reports twice a year, which feels right for the amount of grant that it is, and that's great. There's a great portal that you all use, Smart Simple, where you put all your applications in there, you do your reports in there. It's very straightforward. That's quite good. Yeah, you all were great on no-cost extensions. So I think we find the Felicity. Anything to add on the, since you're the one writing the reports?
No, I find Smart Simple an excellent platform, actually. Easy to monitor.
Totally.
Sorry, could you just wait for the mic, because the translators can't translate what you're saying.
Sorry, that was bad. Sorry.
Thank you.
No, I find Smart Simple to be an excellent platform for tracking all of the reports that have been submitted, particularly organizations over time. I only started with Turquoise Mountain 2 years ago, and was able to see where our ICH project from ALIPH was at each stage. So I think that's a really great process to continue. Anything else to add? Just on the competing donor challenges, I would say in Afghanistan, the challenge we're facing now is that after the fall of Kabul, most donors withdrew. So we had a really wonderful ALIPH emergency project for the ground floor of the old Kabul hotel, which we completed despite the very challenging times when the Taliban first came. But other donors all withdrew. Department of State, Germans, many others are just not willing to take the steps or engagement that it needs to fund build heritage in conflict zones.
But
So
these are government organizations, right?
Yeah, U.S. Department of State.
Foreign donors. And so ALIPH in Afghanistan is our only continuing donor that continues to fund build heritage. And so I think it's increasingly important, but also great to look for opportunities of how do we work more closely with ALIPH to design projects that can kind of complement or fill in those gaps.
And it's our ambition to continue doing projects in Afghanistan, so feel free to submit proposals.
It's music to my ears.
Sorry, gentleman in the back there.
Thank you very much, and this has been very informative. And the forum in general has been a wonderful opportunity to know what everybody else is doing. But my question has to do with in-country. Is there some means of communicating, engaging, having some kind of conversation with other programs within the country? Just through this forum, I discovered that there's a lot that we could share with two other programs, for example, in Iraq, where I'm working. So how can we sort of get communicating in such a way as to complement and maybe build up, into a next stage where our work could come together?
Yeah, I mean, this is an excellent question because we were, how do you deal with several projects in a single region, and then also projects that, in a second question we can be dealing with like multi-phase projects like over time. So. Would you like to answer that, or?
Very, very happily. I think the ALIPH Forum is one forum for that. That's also why it was conceived like this. I think it was mentioned before. It's been in the planning for 2 years, and for various reasons, it hadn't happened. So, and hopefully, it's going to be a more regular thing. Otherwise, we have, perhaps not in that particular case, but we regularly organize kind of small meetings between project operators who are in the same area. I'm looking at our colleagues from La Guilde, from Raqqa, where really very regularly every couple of months everybody sits around the Zoom for an hour and a half. Doesn't have to be very long. Kind of updates each other where they go, where's the next. Also, they update each other on new funding opportunities, new phases of other projects, because we also like it when, as Laurent mentioned, ALIPH doesn't have infinite funds, so actually the other grant-making institutions also co-funding is always welcome. But yeah, we're always ready to do these.
I hope. You're attending obviously the Majlis for Iraq. The Majlises that were the Majalis that were organized as part of the forum are very much done with that intent, is really to bring everybody together to see what's going on, what projects are happening, what projects may happen in the future, talk about challenges and how they've been resolved. Or continuing challenges, to think of solutions together. So this is very much the point of the forum. So yeah.
And I think a small silver lining of the pandemic has been that we've become so much more comfortable of
just phoning or
getting everybody in a virtual room as well.
So communication, keyword. So. Does anybody have any more questions on challenges? Because then we can start talking about solutions. Okay, sir, yes.
Thank you very much. One of the main challenges that we are facing normally with the rehabilitation and also immediate action is that we are not going to have a feasibility study for 1 year and then designing the project and then going to implementation. Therefore, we have all together in a package that we propose to ALIPH. But then everything is a rough estimation. Okay, we are going to use 200 cubic meter of some material and so and so. But in reality, this 10% feasibility to move amongst or inside one category, it's not really easy to manage at the second phase of the project. And this is the thing that is always challenging me. It's a third project that I'm working with ALIPH, and these are all long projects. The first year, you are happy because you have a lot of budget under each budget line. But in the second year, you have to be you're really restricted with that money, and then you have to manage it. That was one of the problems that we faced always, because the first estimation is very rough, and then you are asking us for a detailed budget breakdown in few months after the start of the project, and that time is not enough for us, particularly when you're facing some technical project like the Fifth Minaret or like, for example, the Bala Hisar in the past and now Meseinak. We are all having a lot of challenges for that. I'm happy if someone could help us how to manage this problem.
Can I just second that from another co-worker in Afghanistan? We find that's the only thing I would say as well, is that particularly with building BOQs, like how many meter moraba of wood are you going to use? And there's no way you're going to count the bricks right the first time. So I think particularly for building BOQs, it would actually be easier if there, I don't know what the mechanisms is to deal with that, whether there's a full realignment, I don't know. But we find that a little bit difficult too.
No, I mean, we're fully aware of these challenges. So what we tend to do these days is to, I mean, the board approves an up to amount of an envelope, which is pretty large. And usually what we do is that we pay a first installment, which makes it possible for the grantee to do a more in-depth feasibility study or scoping study. And afterwards, after this first stage, I mean, we redefine the budget. So maybe it wasn't the way we did 4 years ago when we started, but that's something we've started implementing recently, and I think that's the way to go.
Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you, all of this information. Just I have a question, but I want to speak by Arabic if you have translate.
Can it work?
Sorry.
No, don't.
شكرا لكم على هذه المعلومات القيمة. أنا أعتقد أنه المجتمعات المحلية مهم جدا مشاركتهم. أنا آركولوجي تخصصي آثار، شاركت في كثير من الحفريات الأثرية، وأتفق مع أحد الحضور ذكر أنه المجتمعات المحلية مهم مشاركتها وإعطائها معلومة أكبر حتى يقدموا معلومة عن تاريخ المكان لكي تسهل من عملية استفادة العمل في الموقع. لكن أنتم أديتوا أعمال جميلة جدا في المواقع من خلال الريبيلت، إعادة الترميم والبناء من جديد. لكن عندما ينتهي العمل، هل تواجهون وتغادر هذه الفرق المشاريع، هل تواجهون أو هل تواجه هذه المواقع مشاكل من المجتمعات المحلية، مثلا تغير في شكلها، لا تهتم فيها، تضيف عليها مثلا مواد بناء حديثة، وبالتالي المشروع اللي أنتم أديتوه بصورة جميلة وجيدة يعني يخضع للتغيير بعد مغادرة الفرق؟ أعتقد أنها من ضمن الصعوبات، وأبي أعرف هل من الممكن أن المجتمعات المحلية تغير هذه المواقع أم يحافظ الموقع على شكله الأصلي بعد مغادرة فريقكم ونهاية المشروع؟
Which I think maybe from examples from your own projects.
It's so complicated. Very important. Yes, people start putting satellite dishes, clamping it onto beautiful carved wood, yes. One of the things that I think we do, which is probably a little bit controversial, is that we don't really leave. So the sites in which we work, and it's why I don't take on sites very easily, it's because I intend to have a long-term relationship, like 10, 20 years with the place. But it's not me. Like, I lived in Kabul for 5 years, but it's my Afghan staff, and now this institute sits there. So I'm not leaving. I mean, I think that's my honest answer to it. Because I do think that if you just finish a site, write a sustainability plan and go, it doesn't usually end very well. I think that where there is real tourism, that can be different. I feel that in some of our work in Jordan. Yeah, and with the caravanserai, part of the key of that is that the Afghan carpet industry is a viable industry. There are 1 million weavers in Afghanistan. They're taking the place that Turkey has left in terms of production of hand-knotted carpets. Like, there's a real market proposition there. We're putting it into a historic building. So I basically think that you can't just drop off the keys and leave.
But that's, so the mission of your organization is to actually provide these community programs in these organizations. Now, in the example of Riwak, that's not really the case. You're mostly you put it as catalyst, right?
Yes, رح أجاوب بالعربي.
Yes,
I'm going to answer
okay.
in Arabic in respect to.
Yes.
فعلا النقطة اللي ذكرتها كثير بنواجهها هي واحدة من أحد الصعوبات لأنه بصير الترميم وبصير بالطريقة الصحيحة باستخدام المواد الصحيحة بدراسة شاملة وكاملة للمبنى وأصالته وإلى آخره. وبعدين لما المجتمع والمؤسسات الثقافية تأخذ المراكز ومرات كمان للسكن، مرات بتحدث تغييرات لها اللي مش بالضرورة تكون مدروسة. مرات بيستعملوا إسمنت، مرات بيضيفوا إضافات غير مرغوب فيها أو بتأثر على المبنى. والفكرة إنه إحنا السياسة تبعتنا إنه نقلل من هاي التدخلات بالشكل اللي بتصير فيه من خلال أول إشي تعاقداتنا مع الناس. طورنا تعاقدات اللي تسيطر على هاي الموضوع، ومن خلال بناء القدرات فإحنا بعملية الترميم بصير في شرح موفى وتدريب حتى للمستخدمين شو طبيعة المواد المستخدمة، ليش بزبطش نستخدم إسمنت لأنه بقتل المبنى، الرطوبة كيف نتخلص منها. مثلا الرطوبة واحدة من العوائق الكبيرة، والناس بيستصعبوا يفهموا إنه المبنى عشان يتعافى من المية اللي دخلته خلال 20 سنة بده 5 سنين يضل يتك الإصارة ويرجع يعملها. والمباني القديمة أيضا قائمة على الصيانة الدورية. هذا كمان مبدأ مش موجود في الحديثا، يعني إنه الواحد كل سنة بده يعمل الإصارة، بده يظبط الكحلة، بده ينظف الحجر إلى آخره. والإشي الجديد إنه كمان صرنا نعمل كفالة صيانة على المؤسسات الشريكة اللي بتكون معنا، اللي هي مبلغ برتصد بيسيطر الوضع. يعني أنت ما بتقدر تعمل تغييرات اللي بدك إياها بدون استشارة. إحنا بنساعدك باستشارات مجانية، بس إذا أحدث التغيير في المبنى بتصفي عليك زي غرامة بتدفعها، لأنه كمان المباني بعد ترميمها بتعود لأصحابها ولازم تعود بالشكل اللائق له. بحكيش إنه 100% مسيطرين على الوضع، بس بنحاول قدر الإمكان، وهي واحدة من التحديات اللي بتواجهنا.
And just on the building, because we've been talking about that a lot, that sounds very familiar to me. But in terms of like the maintenance of individual buildings, in our experience, we just usually have the owner, the people who are living in that building and in that community are just working on the buildings. And so, for example, so if the traditional building technique is actually better, it will be used again most of the time. So, you know, in Afghanistan, on those buildings, people have begun to put plastic sheeting on the roof, under the mud, to make it not leak. But it doesn't work. It's not breathable. There are a lot of problems. So when they fix their own roof with our funding and see that it doesn't leak when you use the correct material, that it doesn't leak and that it breathes, they'll do it again. It's not more expensive than the plastic sheet. They just have to know how to do it. So I suppose where traditional building materials are actually better, if the people do it themselves the first time, they'll probably do it the second time. And in a little individual basis, I find that works pretty well.
Sure. Mike, second row, please.
I think he's in French.
Je profite de ces questions d'interaction avec les communautés locales pour essayer de faire un pendant avec ce dont on parlait ce matin sur les conséquences des changements climatiques. Avec les changements climatiques, on voit que le patrimoine souffre également du fait de ces conséquences-là. Et ma réflexion, parce qu'on travaille également dans les contextes post-catastrophes naturelles, avec de plus en plus la communauté internationale de l'aide humanitaire ou d'intervention post-catastrophe naturelle venant à des processus qui sont dits self-recovery ou localisation, c'est-à-dire permettre aux communautés de se reconstruire par elles-mêmes sans forcément l'appui de structures extérieures, y compris si ce sont des ONG nationales. Est-ce que nous, professionnels de la réhabilitation du patrimoine, on est prêts à laisser les communautés travailler par elles-mêmes, y compris en faisant des erreurs pour se réapproprier les savoir-faire traditionnels? Et est-ce que ALIPH, en tant que bailleur, est prêt à financer directement les communautés pour qu'elles puissent faire ce travail?
Would you like to answer?
C'est une superbe question.
Oui.
Très, très superbe. J'ai quelqu'un du comité scientifique avec moi. Je suis rassurée. Après, comment nous travaillons aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment que les projets qu'on met en œuvre, on a besoin d'un garant scientifique, comme on l'appelle dans notre speak. Mais je pense que l'un n'exclut pas forcément de l'autre. S'il y a, par exemple, comme Shoshana l'a expliqué, une certaine technique sur laquelle on veut travailler, la technique, elle est... J'essaie de faire le point. Si cette technique, la transmission de cette technique fait partie du projet, je pense que c'est tout à fait... je pense qu'ALIPH est tout à fait...
C'est un important critère qu'on regarde quand on regarde les projets, c'est ce transfert de savoir-faire, l'inclusion des communautés locales. Comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est par rapport à toutes les phases du projet, pas juste l'exécution, de façon à ce que dans le futur, de nouveaux projets seront remontés par ces communautés directement, enfin par des ONG ou des opérateurs locaux qui vont conceptualiser des nouveaux projets. Donc, en fait, on commence peut-être par un projet qui vient d'un opérateur un peu plus grand ou d'un opérateur international, mais au bout du compte, ça devrait commencer un élan qui vient de la communauté elle-même, au bout du compte. Et donc ça, c'est important dans tous les projets qu'on regarde. Ça répond à votre question? Ou pas tellement.
Je le dis d'autant plus que je suis juge et partie.
Oui.
Cratère, nous accompagnons beaucoup de projets dans ce sens-là, avec un appui technique extérieur, y compris en renforçant les capacités des ONG qui travaillent localement. Mm-hmm. Mais dans la mesure où il y a une nouvelle philosophie dans l'aide humanitaire, en faisant le lien entre urgence, réhabilitation et développement, c'est de dire d'impulser les processus, et bien évidemment, c'est de dire de commencer par quelque chose et mettre les communautés dans une dynamique où elles pourraient faire par elles-mêmes.
Oui, mais comme vous avez fait avec Crater, c'est le savoir-faire des maçons, des maîtres artisans, de toute une économie, donc tout un savoir-faire qui, au bout du compte, se transfère même dans d'autres endroits du Mali, avec toutes ces connaissances qui peuvent s'échanger à travers tout un territoire, en fait, pas juste dans la localité où le conflit a été...
Tout à fait, ouais. Tout à fait. Ce vers quoi je veux arriver, c'est la capacité des professionnels dont je fais partie de dire à un moment donné qu'il faut lâcher prise, en fait. C'est ce regard réflexif que j'ai par rapport à nos pratiques à nous. Certes, on travaille dans la valorisation des cultures constructives locales. Nous, à Grenoble, on dit par moments qu'on ne voit plus la montagne tellement elle est présente au quotidien et des gens viennent voir la montagne que nous ne voyons plus. Donc, c'est la même manière avec les cultures constructives locales, y compris avec des sachants, des vieux maçons qui ont ces capacités-là. Et quand on vient, j'espère qu'on ne vient plus comme ça, apprendre des autres pour transcrire et former, parce que c'est aussi mieux comprendre ce qui fait sens et ce qui fait patrimoine dans ce que les gens font, et ensuite le diffuser comme étant une bonne pratique. Donc, jusqu'où sommes-nous prêts, nous, professionnels, à dire à un moment donné, le patrimoine, certes, on le regarde en tant que professionnel, mais en tant que bien matériel ou immatériel d'une communauté, il faut peut-être aussi à un moment donné lâcher et remettre la communauté au devant de sa responsabilité par rapport à la transmission qu'elle a su faire. Parce que si ce patrimoine arrive jusqu'à nous aujourd'hui, c'est que ces communautés-là ont été en capacité de... ça peut être ambivalent comme propos, en travaillant tous les jours dans ces contextes-là, et de voir comment est-ce que, y compris les logiques de bailleurs et de professionnels, peuvent dire, à ce moment-là, faisons confiance aux communautés pour qu'elles le fassent par elles-mêmes, quitte à ce qu'elles fassent des erreurs par moment, mais que d'apprendre de ces erreurs-là sans forcément continuer à être présent. Voilà.
Ouais, ça amène à une autre question par rapport à le post-projet, en fait. D'un côté, par rapport à... bon, je vais switcher en anglais, parce que c'est plus facile. We're going to switch to the post-project. What happens after the punctual project that ALIPH has funded, has been completed? How do you monitor? How do you keep track of these projects in the future, and their progress, and the long-term kind of what you call value for money? Like over time. Over time, how do you monitor that? Or do you have you? I mean, it's only been 5-6 years, so there's not that many projects yet. But how are you thinking of looking at that, of keeping track of that over time, to make sure that all the effort that's been put in. You're welcome. Anybody is.
We have, I think it was last year that we have put in place so, as you say, ALIPH was created 6 years ago. Operational, I think we became 4 years ago. We were very much focused on launching, let's say, the call for projects, get the projects running, provide support when necessary, and so on. So after we got to 150 projects, something like 120 projects, we have developed a kind of very simple. We try to keep things simple at ALIPH, an evaluation framework. So I think it will be this year that we will be starting on those who have finished, not finished, go through more systematic evaluations. But then I would also say that we, with some of the organizations, ALIPH has grown, but also we have grown together with the organizations together. So when we've started with a smaller project, perhaps something is a bit more larger scale is going on. And actually, perhaps one measure of success would be that when we have started with a small initiative, that we're now in a position to do something bigger together. That's already a kind of measure of success from my small point of view. I'm happy to pass on. No?
But projects, when they are approved, do they always need to have an element of sustainability? Meaning, you finish the renovation, but do you require a vision and sort of a guides for how it's going to survive in the future? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, from the scientific committee, we definitely look at that. It's not just the project from, during the project timeline, let's say. It's really looking at the impact that it will have over time, and its life, the life of the life cycle of the project, of the where the project's being implemented and its possible ramifications.
And you're not old enough yet to really be able to see many projects that have been finished.
Well, I think there's emergency projects that have been finished, I mean, from their nature, but, you know, these are really reactive kind of Band-Aid, first aid kind of projects where that long-term impact is not necessarily part of the outcome. We're just trying to stopgap and address, it's first aid.
So maybe 10, 15 years from now, right, you'll have a better vision of how did some of these projects that we financed in the early years, where are they now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that'll be interesting to see.
No, I was going to say that Shoshana and Chada, because they've been part of organizations that are much, that are older than ALIPH, can give some insights as to how they do that, how they monitor that.
Yeah.
Or if you do.
Chada, do you want to?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So I think scale is really important, and I also think that sustainability, and by that I mean organizational and financial sustainability, not environmental, is a sort of terrible buzzword that gets thrown around, and it can mean very different things, right? We're talking about projects mostly in conflict zones. Mm-hmm. The idea that a project is going to write like a 20-year financial plan for a building that's going to work is the wrong question. No, and you all don't ask it. I mean, you all do.
It's more of a social sustainability aspect.
So that's where I think scale really matters, right? If it's, I don't know if this will work, but it will. So if we're talking about somebody's house that was destroyed by a fire, the point is they don't have anywhere to live. So then it gets fixed and they're in their house again. That is a relatively straightforward burning need. Emergency project, yes, was true of the Restaurant Kabul Qadim, which is the old Kabul restaurant, which was a thriving business and hotel, and it fell down, and then it was put back up. There, you had a business, you had a guy who ran his business there, and it worked well, and the building needed to be put back up. So I think those are two examples where you need to ask the question, and you do, and then it's explained, and I think that's more straightforward. I think that when we're talking about a tourism site and more complex finances and things, it is harder to be exact about what will happen in the future. For us, really the sustainability of this project has been about creating the institute in that big hole, the snow hole. Creating this institute there, because that is an Afghan institution with an Afghan board that continues. Now, that needs funding. It's an educational institution, right? That's not financially viable. That needs funding, but it is something that will continue to be funded. From that come these craft businesses, also architectural training, so then there's maintenance built in for how people remud their walls every 2 years. So that's a very complex system, and the way that I judge it 16 years later is that the houses are being maintained, and that and we do socioeconomic surveys every 3 or 4 years to check employment levels and check healthcare use and things. But those complex systems are harder to plan perfectly.
These are great tools to kind of share in terms of monitoring the long-term social sustainability of projects. We're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. I think I see people getting... Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
I would, encourage you all to continue the discussion. I mean, this is just a catalyst for exchange. Maybe before we leave, if there's any kind of insights on... would you like to
I think there is one topic we haven't touched upon so far. I think, I realize it's not a popular one, but I think we should say a few words about it. It's transparency, which is a huge challenge in the context of not just heritage, but doing projects in conflict areas. And we realize, we deal with countries with uneven economies, with rule of law, which is pretty weak, and sometimes even a failed state. So it's a difficult subject, and we try to draft a transparency policy with the help of our audit committee. And I actually wanted to give the word to Jeff so that he can say a few words about the way we approach the topic.
You need to be transparent. I mean, you need to communicate. And you need to be honest. Because at the basis of everything is trust, right? Our donors, whether they're states or individuals, trust the team to use the money wisely. The team needs to know from you that you're using the money wisely, which means show us how you're doing it. I mean, do the best to back up and explain to us how you're using it. I don't know all your processes for, documenting when you make progress payments, but it's really important for everybody in the chain to have the ability and the confidence to trust the other people in the group. So whatever those requirements are, try to meet them. If you have a problem with some aspect of it, talk to the team, because the trust and confidence is critical for everybody in this process.
Many organizations, draft kilometers of policies, and I fully respect that because, they implement their own projects, so they need these rules. It's not the approach we adopted when we started because, obviously we have our own set of rules for our internal operation, our internal finances, but we try not to impose them to our grantees because of the variety of geographies and projects we do. What we want to make sure when we do the due diligence of projects, we want to make sure that these issues have been taken into consideration ahead of the project, that you have thought about these issues, that you have a strategy. For example, if we take the example of a procurement policy, we don't demand that grantees' procurement policy would be a copy of ours. We just want to make sure that they have thought about it, even if it's a tiny organization with just half a page of, they know exactly how they will sign off on expenses, that they have a rule, even if it's a simple one. We want to make sure that they have thought about it. And what we do with the great help of Najet, my grant finance officer, at the time of the reporting, we try to compare the rules they have set for themselves and the reporting they're doing.
Great. I just want to talk about, before we leave, I just wanted to talk about looking ahead. So maybe, now that you've we've had this discussion and we're able to understand better what ALIPH's expectations are, how does ALIPH work in terms of reviewing and supporting the implementation of projects. How do you think we could be encouraging more local operators to join the family? Because sometimes this might feel daunting. Maybe some of you could answer this if you are small operators. Maybe you've been daunted by perhaps reporting, transparency issues, money wiring challenges, all of these things. So, is there anything that you would that would help you, encourage you, or facilitate for you? Proposing projects for funding? No?
Good, no problem.
Good, that's great. Everybody is. Be ready for many applications for the call for projects. That's great.
Well, perhaps you could describe, you explained something to me the other day that sometimes when project operators have trouble meeting some of the requirements or documenting things, you actually add into the budget a resource that they could hire to do these kinds of things. So, which I think is creative and a brilliant idea, just help you do what we need you to do so that we all feel comfortable giving you the money so you can do the work.
One of the one of the greatest pride among the 180 projects we've done is supporting this tiny NGO in Niger, Imana Tariq, with the restoration of the old city of Agadez in Niger. I mean, it's a tiny organization, and Mohamed, he had obviously the scientific and technical expertise, obviously the knowledge and experience of the local context. He know how to manage people on the ground. What he was missing is practical experience of financial management and reporting. But we were very happy to support him doing so. I mean, we're so happy. I think it should be ALIPH's mission to support these small local NGOs to grow. So we're welcoming proposals from these type of organizations too.
There's a question.
There, I don't see. Oh,
the lady.
All right.
Okay. Yes, thank you for this workshop. Very interesting insights from Riwa and Afghanistan. So I represent Sursok Museum, who was a partner with ALIPH, and thanks to your help, we were able to secure the first phase of the rehabilitation works. And actually, it helped the museum to fundraise as a second phase and finish. So today we finished restoring the museum. And I wanted to just ask about how do you envision post-crisis? So once we rehabilitated, as we said, the building is now finished. Do you envision also your partnership as a post-crisis also helping, for example, preserve archives? Or is it really mainly the grants are towards emergency response?
It's not just emergency, obviously. I mean, we have calls for projects that encompass, other types of projects. But we realized during the last 6 years that we definitely have an added value when it comes to emergency. When it comes to large-scale projects that span over many years and that requires huge amounts of funds, I mean, we would be happy to contribute, but we know that there are other type of organizations that can do it maybe with more, if we just take the example of UNESCO, yeah. So emergency, yes, we're very happy to do emergency. We don't do only emergency, but I think it's, from my point of view at least, it's definitely our key asset.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's ALIPH is really based on action, on flexibility. I mean, as you can see, flexibility even in terms of implementing projects, like, cost, time, taking into consideration the risks on the ground. All of this is a strength of ALIPH, unlike other organizations, to be able to be so flexible with grantees, I think. Agreed. I just want to come back to what Jeff and Laurent were saying about, but they're still having the coffee break. If you guys want to stay a little longer, we can keep on discussing. I have visibility there. They're not gone yet. I wanted to give Shoshana just a chance, Shoshana and Chada, to talk about what other tools or support mechanisms do you think would be beneficial to support smaller operators where there might be a lack in terms of project management or financial management, other than the tool that Laurent and Jeff were discussing? Mentoring across different organizations.
Do you think of any? Mentoring.
Not really. I think I second what you have said. And the issue that doesn't only have to do with ALIPH, it also has to do with our localities, is that we're really working in islands. So bringing locals together, as mentioned earlier in Iraq, but also in other places, is the case where, because we have knowledge that we can complement the work of other organizations, and other organizations can complement what we're lacking. And I think this sort of network is missing. because of being overwhelmed, being under pressure of financial stability, we need to to plan ahead. We need to have the salaries for our staff to continue for the next year and the other, and also growing our organization and reflecting and monitoring and evaluation and doing this sort of things. We're really overwhelmed. And on the other hand, there's also the issues of fragmentation politically and in terms of, you're dealing with very complex situations where bringing people together, even in smaller scale context relatively, is an issue that, if done, can be of great benefit because we have many resources that are missing. If we put them together, we'll be working better.
That one. No. I agree. The only thing we talked about recently, I totally agree. We're all too busy. Nobody collaborates. We're all terrible. My fault. Everybody's fault. We're all terrible. More, within country, I think that's what matters. But one of the things that our younger staff, like our younger heritage practitioners, really care about is mentoring. Like somebody slightly older than them working in a similar context is incredibly helpful. Like they don't need particular training courses because there's a lot of that. It's more the, I think, professional connections.
Particularly in conflict zones.
Yeah. So that will be probably our last comment, and then we'll close.
But I think it's important. Two things. Working with strong national staff, that's how we've been able to continue. After the fall of Kabul, I was evacuated for a few months. Engineer Mahaiman, the engineering team stayed. I'm the only foreigner with TM now, but those guys are so technically strong, but they do need a lot of my help and also ALIPH's help to get them up to speed to manage donor programs. And how we've been able to continue is the strength of those guys. And it's those staff who will go on to start small organizations in the future. So I think one, supporting them, and then two, the mentorship that Shoshana said. I mean, we give a lot of our time and energy, but Afghanistan feels really cut off and isolated right now. But every day I'm so inspired by what the teams are doing. And we already chat a lot with our friends at AKTC, Mustafa and others, sharing their knowledge. But they would love the chance to share their great work broadly and globally. That will really, I think, give them this like added strength to continue. And also they could learn from other heritage experts in the world. So 2 suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe you could.
Okay,
Sandra's giving us the cutoff point, but yes.
It's amazing that
yeah.
I don't want to.
No, I was just going to conclude and to ask you to please continue the discussion with any one of the moderators or anybody in the audience. If you can catch the coffee break before the majlis.